And I'm very excited to now turn things over to our presenter for this morning's workshop, who is a longtime friend of the Academy and a past mentor as well, Ms. Donna Samp. Thank you so much, Donna. We really appreciate you coordinating this event this morning.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure, Sarah. Well, welcome everyone. And thank you for attending our panel discussion on problem solving and critical thinking. I will start by introducing our panel of Hesselbein alums. Jess Scott. Jess, you want to give us a wave? There you go. Jess is a 2019 Hesselbein alum and received undergraduate degrees in political science and economics from the University of Pittsburgh. Jess is currently serving as the LGBTQIA+ Commission intern for the Office of the Mayor and the City of Pittsburgh, working on community advocacy of the Commission. This fall, he will be attending Pitt's Graduate School of Public and International Affairs to pursue a master's degree with a concentration in security and intelligence and policy research analysis. Our next alum is Andon Fossum. Andon, you want to just raise your hand there? So there you go. Okay. Andon is a 2017 Hesselbein alum and a 2018 graduate of the University of Pittsburgh with double majors in biology and history and philosophy of science and a minor in chemistry. After graduation, Andon has served for 2 years as a post-baccalaureate IRTA research fellow at the National Institutes of Health. Andon is currently an MD and PhD student at the Yale School of Medicine. Tanya Cerrone is a 2018 Hesselbein alum and a senior at the University of Antioquia, Colombia, serving as the student representative of nutrition and dietetics, an academic tutor, and part of the conflict of interest in human nutrition and food study group. Actively involved in campus dynamics, Tanya advocates for human rights, disease prevention, and the promotion of welfare with a communitarian approach. Tanya, you want to give us a little wave so that we know who you are? Okay, very good. Jared Schlaff is, Jared, you want to raise your hand? There he is. Jared is a 2010 Hesselbein alum. He has launched 4 nonprofit and social impact projects and orientations, making an impact on youth mentorship, environmental justice, localized manufacturing, and food access arenas across Metro Detroit. He has received many national and regional awards in recognition of his service and leadership. Jarrett is the co-founder and CEO of Pingree Detroit, a worker-owned, community-based design and manufacturing company founded in 2015. His team of United States veterans and Detroiters are paid a living wage to craft sustainable footwear, face masks, and accessories using upcycled materials from the American auto industry. So let's get into our presentation here. I want to thank all of our panelists for being with us today. As leaders, so often we are charged with executing projects or addressing challenges that impact people and organizations in significant ways. Continuously improving and expanding our problem-solving and critical thinking skills will make us more effective in this role. In today's program, we will review a basic problem-solving model and briefly define the terms critical thinking and problem-solving. But the bulk of our presentation today will be spent on a discussion of strategies that we can all practice to boost critical thinking in individuals and in groups, and how these critical thinking skills can be applied to problem solving. Our panel of Hesselbein alumni will provide examples of how these strategies have been employed in their experiences. Everyone should have received the document via email from Sarah that includes a very brief sample of a problem-solving model, a brief list of the critical thinking strategies we're going to talk about today, and references for some of the points we will be discussing. Let's take a real quick look at a basic problem-solving model first. There are many problem-solving models in the literature, depending on the industry or type of challenge or project that we're involved in. There may be some variations to this basic model. But from my review, most follow a similar path. We always start with identifying and defining the problem or the goal. This sounds like it's very simple, but actually it is easier said than done. It is extremely important that at the beginning, we define the goal and identify the goal completely, and that it is clear and well understood. Next, we confirm and analyze the causes, the related facts, the precedents, similar situation, and constraint. Based on these facts and based on desired outcomes, we develop alternatives, evaluate those alternatives, and make sure to anticipate any possible positive and negative outcomes of each alternative, and in the end, try to select the best solution. At that point, we develop action steps and implement them. We include methods to evaluate our progress, and we stay alert to evaluate and receive feedback as work progresses and modify our plan as needed. At the conclusion, we always evaluate our results, and if needed, go back to the beginning and start again. Many resources blend the terms problem solving and critical thinking together, and in some cases even use the two terms interchangeably. Of course, when we have a challenge or a project to tackle, critical thinking and problem solving are both needed and are certainly very close connected. However, I have come to think of the two terms as distinct from each other. Let me use an analogy to illustrate how I define the two terms. Let's say our challenge is to perform a backflip. That would be quite a challenge, right? We can apply traditional problem-solving models and put together a strategy. We would probably investigate the biomechanics, study some film, seek a great coach, get the proper equipment, establish the learning progressions that we would need to be involved in, and put together a plan to learn the skill. But if we do not have the required strength and power and flexibility, we will not be able to execute the plan. No matter how good our plan is, if our strength and power and flexibility, if we don't have our strength and power and flexibility, we will not be successful. To me, critical thinking provides the strength and power and flexibility for our thought process that is so important to our success in developing and executing our strategy to solve a problem. And the good news is, just like developing the strength and power and flexibility in our bodies, I believe that we can improve our critical thinking by regularly and intentionally exercising the components of critical thinking. So let's turn our attention now to developing our critical thinking muscle. There are strategies we can practice on a regular basis, on a daily basis, that can eventually become habits and can strengthen our critical thinking. As we improve our critical thinking, we can apply those skills to the development of and execution of our problem-solving plans. The first strategy, question assumptions. In her article on your reference list, Helen Lee Boygus suggests questioning assumptions on a regular basis to sharpen thinking skills. We should make a habit of questioning basic assumptions to make sure they are valid and accurate. Asking questions and seeking validation and clarity may lead us to uncovering some issues that were not evident at the outset and may widen our universe of options and considerations. We need to make sure the information and data we are using are accurate and make sure that we have identified the real and accurate problem and not just a symptom of the problem. Andon, let's turn to you. Can you tell us about how you may have utilized this strategy?
Sure. Hello, everyone. It's great to speak with you today. So I'm not sure how many of you are pursuing medicine or interested in really any health professional field. But in my experience, I kind of had this one-track view of what pursuing medicine looks like, right? As an undergrad, I, did the necessary research. I shadowed, I volunteered at hospitals, and I thought that there were XYZ things I had to check off the list to get done. And as Donna had introduced, I'm an MD PhD candidate. So that means that I'm pursuing both an MD and a PhD. So I'm doing both clinical work and science. And I kind of had a very closed-minded view of what that looks like. I thought that to be both sides of the equation had to relate to each other. So for example, I do a lot of research in chronic metabolic disease. So things like obesity, diabetes, heart disease. So because I'm so interested in that scientifically, I believed that I had to do something that relates to that clinically, which kind of means endocrinology in like the medical field. But as I kind of gained more experiences and I learned to open my perspective, I found that, you really actually don't need to marry those two things. Like, I could be a surgeon and also still do research in metabolic science, or I could, do oncology and still do my research in what I'm interested in. Or, it kind of opens up to the idea of, if I'm not interested in doing that anymore, I can do something else. So I think that kind of talking to as many people as I could and gaining as many like varied experiences as I could, I started to question things that I thought were truth in my field, or as I pursue this field. And kind of in retrospect, I'm realizing that, oh wow, like I could have been very limited as to what I thought was possible within my career. And I'm only at the start. So, 10, 15 years from now, what would happen if I still was in that mindset? So I guess this experience is showing me that it's really important to reflect on the things that you think are so ingrained in your mind. And, for me, that means understanding the different ways I can be a physician scientist, but for you, that might mean something else completely. If you're interested in exercising, what kind of exercises do you like to do? Why do you like to do them? And what if you did something else that potentially, opens doors to a whole host of things. So I think that it's very imperative to look at the things that you don't necessarily see other options in, because there are always other options. But yeah, I mean, that's a lot of what I have to say. And Donna, if you have any other comments.
Okay, no, that's great. That's great. That's a great example. Thank you, Andon. Very good. Okay, our next strategy, seek diversity of thought. When addressing a problem, we should consider expanding our thinking by including individuals in the process who think differently than we do. If we surround ourselves only with others with the same background, same knowledge, and same experience as ours, we run the risk of missing perspectives or questions that could be valuable in finding solutions and determining actions. When thinking through problems and challenges with others, we should make sure that everyone involved has the freedom and comfort level to contribute, to ask new questions, and to challenge thinking. Encouraging this diversity of thought could uncover previously undiscovered information or new paths to explore. Jarrett, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how you have used this strategy in your work.
Of course. And again, it's great to be with everybody today. I'm calling you here from Detroit. So at the core, when we think about individuals, and especially in leadership positions, there are different schools of thought, but there are these common core parts of any really strong team. And it includes a diversity of thinking, a diversity of thoughts. You need the analytical side of folks. You need folks that are driving and really hyper-focused on outcomes. You need folks who are holding space and making sure that everyone's able to participate, and other folks that are maybe more inclined to really think big picture. And so one story that comes to mind in thinking about diversity of thought was when Pingree first started. We didn't start like a traditional company where we start with a product. We started with a problem we wanted to address, which was twofold. It was, right now we saw that there was a need globally, but especially locally, for sustainable alternatives to the current status quo. We wanted to create a product, we wanted to create something, but the goal was to create something that was community owned, that community could participate in, and also concurrently focus on addressing a problem of homelessness within the veteran community that was literally folks in my neighborhood that I was meeting. So instead of just starting and saying, we know best, we're gonna start a company, here's how it's gonna be, here's what we're gonna make, and here's how we're gonna support these veterans that are working to overcome homelessness, we spent about 3 months doing a listening campaign. And to look more into what that looks like, I'd recommend folks to visit and look into the Highlander Center model of organizing. So we literally spent, again, almost 3 months. We're actually ended up hiring and employing one of the veterans that was literally homeless in my neighborhood to go with me to sit down with veterans nonprofits, veteran shelters, veteran service organizations, groups that specifically had the goal of supporting veterans overcoming homelessness in the veteran community. And we, instead of assuming we knew best, we asked the questions, what do you need? what kind of work do you want to be involved in? What would an environment look like where you could thrive? And what do you see are the greatest problems and barriers for your own success? And those conversations, we went in thinking that the problem was just we needed to throw money to the situation, when in reality, after that listening campaign, we learned that a lot of the men and women we were speaking with, they wanted meaningful living wage work. They wanted to work with their hands. They wanted to be involved in creating solutions at a neighborhood level, but they didn't know how. They wanted to be part of something meaningful. So we literally shifted our approach, talking to the nonprofits. We found there was this big gap between the provision of basic needs and then meaningful living wage work. So we decided that was where we're going to create a wedge at a neighborhood level. So utilizing kind of industry 4.0, really cutting edge technology when you think about 3D printing, 3D knitting, things where you can use kind of automation, but instead of displacing workers, you're empowering creative employment opportunities. So we started that 5 years ago, and really it was grounded in this idea that we are so much stronger when we are guided by what folks are able to speak for themselves, having self-determination to identify what they need. And so we started with that approach of listening to understand, and then that guided our development in the frameworks we use to start the business. So that created us to form a worker-owned company where we didn't have that plan prior. It means that 77 cents of every dollar is shared with our workers. So really at the core, I couldn't stress enough the importance of when you're building teams to have and to explore and understand the different types of leaders on a team. Now, each one is critical. If you don't have someone who's analytical, you might miss certain data points that would be so strong if you don't take the time to really seek out those different differences of opinion, that really you'd be in a disservice to the work itself. So yeah, couldn't stress enough that approach.
That's great. Very good. Thank you, Jarrett. Very good. Okay, our next strategy, seek accurate information. We must always pay close attention to the sources of information that we access and assure the validity of that information if possible. This can be challenging as we are all bombarded constantly by so much information. We need to continuously increase our skill and knowledge about how to search for relevant, reliable, and accurate information. This may take many forms depending on the subject, including identifying and developing professional relationships and networks with highly competent people in a particular field. Another strategy, intentionally think from a variety of perspectives. Jarrett kind of touched on this. An example of this is described in the book, The 6 Thinking Hats, on your reference list. Author Edward de Bono encourages us to deliberately role play in 6 different perspectives. The neutral and objective perspective, someone focused on facts and figures. The emotional perspective, is there an emotional impact that must be considered? The careful and cautious perspective, being alert for problems, pitfalls, or obstacles. The sunny and positive perspective, being mindful of and motivated by the best outcomes possible. The creative perspective, thinking outside the box. And the organizing perspective, bringing all these ideas into a structure. Intentionally playing these different roles ourselves or having members of our team play these different roles may open up new considerations or alternatives. This will also help our teams avoid groupthink and inspire some creative thinking. Jess, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how you have utilized this strategy.
Certainly. Thank you, Donna. So hello, everyone. It's great to be able to speak with you all today. As Donna introduced at the beginning, one of my roles this summer is serving as an intern in the office of the mayor in the city of Pittsburgh, where I'm advocating for the LGBTQIA+ community here within the greater Pittsburgh area. So for me personally, I personally think that perspectives taking is to some degree an innate human characteristic that I think we all possess, but I think at the end of the day, it can really be honed and sharpened a little bit, especially when it comes to advocacy work. So perspective takers are able to really step outside their constraints of their immediate and sometimes biased frames of reference to be able to engage a greater collective. So throughout my professional development, both as a student leader and a young professional now, my greatest mentors I have the strongest connection with have really engaged me to not only develop myself and my leadership capabilities, but also continue to develop others. And that truly makes the greatest leader is when you're developing other leaders as well. So I found that through team development, this has sometimes been the single greatest investment in any organization that I've been a part of, because it really produces the strongest outcomes in turn. Definitely takes a lot of effort, but at the end of the day, I definitely think it's the most worth it. Truly, I don't think anything helps an organization, an initiative, a group, anything better than team development and overall team structure in that development. Through understanding leaders better, you definitely have to, one, connect with them, and then two, engage with them even further. So good leadership requires that, like Donna mentioned, that perspective shift. You must go from seeing things through the eyes of your own leadership and then being able to connect with others to truly see their leadership and how they hone that with their teams as well. So learning to approach an idea or an opportunity through someone else's mindset is helpful because, like I said, it allows you to see your own views in addition to expanding your views to be able to see others' views as well. So as I've grown in leadership, I really think that I've been able to develop this habit by asking leaders on my team for their perspectives and their takeaways after big meetings and things like that. So in doing so, I'm listening to them, but also further engaging them outside of conversations and outside of events and whatnot. I think I've really been able to get a deeper insight into these other areas through one of my roles that I'm serving in this summer. So currently I'm a RISE Summer Pennsylvania Fellow. RISE was founded back in 2017. It started off as a nonprofit student organization that really focused on college and youth issues in particular, in addition to voter engagement and voter education itself. So with that, we're made up of a bunch of different college students from across the nation that are focusing on voter engagement of the youth for the upcoming November 2020 election. So as a fellow, I'm definitely tasked with coalition building in Pennsylvania, advocating for youth issues, but also I'm managing a team of 10 interns. So with that, I definitely have to approach this situation in a unique way, just because obviously we're virtually and digitally organizing now. So that comes with its own set of challenges, but also that we're having to engage students who might not be as familiar with the voting and political system. Some may have never been registered to vote before. Some might be brand new voters who are trying to understand how the political system is impacting them directly. So with that, intentionally thinking from a variety of different perspectives is encouraging because we're able to engage the youth more. An example of this is whenever we talk directly with college students, we're discussing the importance of voter engagement in the eyes of student loan debt crisis, college food insecurity, college homelessness, etc. But whenever we're talking with high school students, we're discussing the public education system and sometimes the cracks in that system, in addition to the workforce and the potential colleges and universities that they're about to enter. So as we're thinking through, like I said, the variety of different perspectives, we're able to build ultimately better, diverse, and passionate coalitions in order to engage the youth vote. So really, we're growing ourselves as leaders, but as I mentioned, we're also being able to grow this whole entire coalition and this whole entire team, something that's definitely differing from our own opinions sometimes. So being able to navigate those conversations as a leader yourself while also developing other leaders. So yeah, thank you for this opportunity, Donna. So right back to you.
Very good. Thank you, Jess. Very good. Very good. Okay, our next strategy, stay alert for bias. We must always try to be aware of our own blind spots and bias. This is often more easily accomplished by sharing ideas with others who might see the topic differently than we do. We should be open to perspectives that differ from ours. We could try asking ourselves questions such as, is our thinking based on facts or opinion? Have we seriously and openly considered the perspective of those who have a different way of thinking about this particular topic? In some cases, it might also be helpful to consider talking to people who might be an expert in a related field or may not be directly involved in our project or challenge who can provide an outsider perspective. Tanya, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how you have seen this strategy at work.
Well, yes. Hello, everyone. I would like to start by emphasizing that my education focuses on health and human nutrition, but please note that this topic transcends the food file, and it's applicable to multiple perspectives such as economic, education, journalism, administration, and so on. Tumaco is a small town located in the Colombian Pacific coast with a high morbidity and mortality rates, especially related with diseases that affect children such as acute diarrheal disease and malnutrition due to a lack of access to food and drinking water. Last month, a campaign was launched to donate milk formulas to children under 5 years old who are part of a psychosocial support foundation. And when a team of graduate colleagues and I found out about it, we did an exhaustive investigation on the contest to realize that it was violating the International Code of Substitute, discouraging breastfeeding, and lacking on a proper advice of a health professional, ideally a nutritionist. This situation, far from helping, it will cost worsened the situation because the formula was donated with the economical interest without the primacy of the common interest. After that, we formally denounced the government entities and civic social organization, the existing bias in planning and execution of this, and finally achieving that the campaign was stopped and putting into the public debate the issue of the conflict of interest, which is an important and necessary and current matter in all areas of knowledge. Authors William Steen and Dennis Thompson will define the term primary interest as what each profession must promote, make us see how the identification of biases in our professional judgment that we may have according to our role in certain company or in the public center corresponding to the influence of secondary interest. For instance, reputation, professional or commercial promotion, research funding, personal benefits, among others. Is one of the main components in the study of conflict of interest, being very important to control corporate strategies that, under false intentions of collective well-being, mask the interest of powerful economic actors. With that being said, the importance of the promoting critical and deliberation of the main problem that a society must face, avoiding the risk of bias, is evident, since it has been seen that biased judgment can be harmful for people who are impacted by those decisions, damage that could be avoided without more exhaustive review of each situation and context. My recommendation for you guys is to always ask ourselves, what does society and my organization expect from me as a professional? This is how we can identify the primary interest that we should always guide our decisions and actions, as well as the secondary interests that can influence our judgment. It is an ethical duty as academics and as leaders to assume the weight of our responsibility in the face of the global public affairs, and to question if the economic interest might be in conflict with the human rights or with the goals set by a company, without leaving aside the fact that we are responsible for what we ignore, say, do, and what we don't say, do, in the face of social responsibility that we have as upright individuals and professionals. That's what I have to say about it.
That's very good, Tanya. And like all the other panelists, all of you are involved in such important work, and that's very important work that you did, and congratulations on getting that decision turned around. That's awesome. Okay, our next topic, practice actively engaging and synthesizing. From your reference list, the author Plummer suggests that we make it a practice to sort through information that comes our way, to figure out what is important on a regular basis every day as we receive content. He calls this synthesizing. Practice of this skill can take the form of summarizing key points from an article, a meeting, or an activity. For example, after reading an article, we ask ourselves, what are the 3 to 5 most important takeaways from this article? As we listen or read, we should make a habit of taking time to identify the most important information and insights, make note of them, and seek clarification and additional details as needed. We should make a habit of actively engaging with content as opposed to passively being present when faced with content. Andon, can you tell us a little story or a few words about this strategy?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the opportunity to talk again. So I think we can all agree that in our everyday lives, we're just inundated with stimulus, right? There's always so much coming in, and we don't necessarily know what to take in, what's important, and what to save for later necessarily. And I mean, I'd also like to argue that a majority of us aren't great at applying those several inputs to our professional lives, even our personal lives. So knowing how to actively engage and synthesize what is kind of being thrown at you every day is really important to be able to reach your goals, both personally and professionally. So for me, that looked like as an undergrad, I was on the track and field team at Pitt. I see Monica's on this call as well. She's also on the track team. Hi, Monica. But in my training, it took a lot of prioritizing what my actual goals were for my athletic performance, right? So when I would go and do my lifts, or I would go and throw every day, or I would watch film, there were several things that I had to consider to improve my technique or to improve my performance. And every single practice or every single film session, there were probably a list of 20 or 30 things that I had to work on just that day. And that got very overwhelming very quickly, just because I really didn't know, what was the most important thing that I had to apply. How long did I have to apply that thing for? How often did I have to go back and reevaluate whether it's working or not, right? So what really helped me as I progressed was having a goal list, or having a priority going into whatever input I'm seeking. So whether that's film, whether that's my lift, whether that's throwing. Say I have maybe a list of 3 goals that, okay, this is what I want to accomplish today. What are the inputs that'll help me, or that'll serve that goal, right? And that can be applied to anything. So that's the first thing, having a priority list, or knowing exactly what you want to get out of that resource. And then it's being active as you take in that input, right? So, it's not having your cell phone out. It's not talking to other people. It's literally sitting there and saying, okay, what am I getting from this? And as it's, if you're watching a film, it's stopping it every couple seconds saying, okay, how do I apply this? Or how does this relate to me? And while that takes a lot longer to get done, at the end of it, you can actually go back and say, oh yeah, okay, so these are the things that I learned from this resource, rather than just saying, oh yeah, I watched that resource, So that's incredibly important to do. And then in terms of synthesizing the resource, so when I would watch film, maybe it would be a half-hour session. I would, before I did anything else, I would get out my notebook and I would write the top 3 points. These are the 3 things that I got from that resource over everything else. Even though there were 30 plus things that I could have written down, there were 3, and those aligned directly with my priorities. So while I'm not taking every single thing that I could have gotten from it, I'm taking the things that are most important to me. And it's very important, or it's crucial that you know what those things are. And if you don't, you have to reflect on it before you go and get that resource. So in terms of professional life, whether you're going to a talk, or you're reading a book or something like that, it's important to know that you're not going to get everything out that it could offer, and that's okay. But it's important to know, or to have an idea of what you expect to get out of it, or what you want to get out of it, and then writing those things down. And then beyond that, going back and reevaluating what you wrote down. And if you don't understand it, or you want more information, seeking out those people or those resources that'll give you that more information. But I think in terms of, as you develop professionally, they're always going to be just blasted with information. So knowing that it's okay to be overwhelmed at first, but you have the tools to condense it to something that's more manageable or digestible, is very important. And Donna, back to you.
Very good, Andon. Thank you so much. Our next strategy, be aware of time and place. We should pay attention to when and where we do our best thinking. For example, do we think more clearly in the morning or in the afternoon? Do we think more clearly in total silence or with music playing? Do we think more clearly when we are alone, or are there people that help us do our best thinking? By paying attention to time and place, when we need to address important challenges, we can seek ways to maximize the most effective time and place. And conversely, there may be a way to minimize the time and place that does not support our best thinking. Another topic would be controlling our stress level. We should be aware of how stress affects our thinking. Learning the physical or mental signs that indicate we are under significant stress will help us, because then we can be alert for those signs, be intentional in our effort to manage the stress, and have a plan in place to get support or relief as needed so we can think clearly. Jarrett, can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Of course. So for this moment, I invite folks to just take a moment to just close your eyes and take a deep breath. It's often just an invitation to slow down for this very moment. And I want to ground the space with the fact that each human cell has 400 billion molecules conducting millions of processes between trillions of atoms. So the total cellular activity in any one human body is staggering. It's 1 septillion interactions, which is a number with 24 zeros after it. So in a millisecond, our body has undergone 10 times the processes than there are stars in the universe. So the importance of knowing self, of knowing the body, we have an entire ecosystem and universe within. So the best way to work through and to understand stress is the process of understanding ourselves and how our body talks to us. So when we think about stress, I would invite everyone to really, we've all done our own research and we're in different varying degrees, but to really continue to be curious about how stress affects you. You know, Googling what causes stress and researching ways to deal with stress. There's so much good information out there and great videos and TED Talks. I'd really encourage you to look at it, but at the core, there's no one right way to be and there's no one right way to deal with stress. But for me, it's really understanding how stress affects me. So literally this week has been a really stressful week. I'm working through a big pivot with my company where we're bringing in new players, new partners that think differently than us. And that, you know, there's misfiring communication. And I found myself feeling a lot of tension in my shoulders. And I could feel my mind being a little foggy. And I've learned over the last probably 5 to 10 years that that's my body's way of telling me, hey, Jarrett, slow down, check in with yourself. Why are you feeling the way you're feeling? And so my sense of overwhelm was because I was focusing on too much at once. I was feeling frustrated, but there are things that I wasn't checking in with around self. And so stress naturally, right, if we think about the daily stressors, can sometimes be good on a small level, right? It can help us focus. It can help in this very moment of where at the core, it's our body's way of doing the whole flight or fight scenario that's trying to support us. So to understand our how we exhibit stress and how we work through it is really important, because with too much stress, it can be debilitating, it can cause burnout, and it can even cause death, right? So we really have to practice getting to know self a little bit more, and really listening and being curious when the body talks to us. So I would encourage folks to explore what routines allow you to work through stress. I know some folks that exercise every day or meditate. There are literally thousands of ways. And it's the importance of you finding your own way, the one that speaks to you. Listening, asking your friends, you know, I've turned into a game of seeing what other people in different positions and different companies, different fields do to find their kind of balance. And so, yeah, I acknowledge each and every one of you for all of the hard work you're doing, and know that the stress we hold, we can shake it off. I do dance meditation by myself in my room sometimes at 9 p.m. with the lights off and just shake it off. So find your own way. There's no one right way, but stay curious and listen to the body. Thanks, y'all.
Very good. Very good. Love that. Okay, Sarah, are we getting a lot of, before I do the last two, are we getting a lot of questions in?
Sorry, so not yet, but
Okay.
This is a great time to remind everybody who is participating in this workshop that if you have a question, if you would like to learn more about what Donna or these panelists are saying, please use the chat function to submit your questions, and we'll go ahead and in a couple minutes we'll be addressing those. So thanks,
Okay.
Donna.
Okay, very good. Okay, great. So our next topic is to be prepared in advance. We should determine if there are aids that can be developed in advance to use as we need them, depending on the nature of the challenges that might come our way. These aids could include things like developing checklists, lists of questions, action plans, lists of organizations with their contact information, and quick access to reference materials. If there are resources that are likely to help us, we should collect or develop these aids in advance, keep them updated, and keep them on hand should the need arise. This could help us stay on track in our work allow us to stay focused on the content, and prevent us from being distracted from the task at hand. I'm going to go ahead and throw in some experiences from my end on this topic. This approach is very important, especially if you're facing a crisis situation. For example, in my previous job, I often needed to manage changes in leadership in significant areas of our department, and often these changes in leadership happened with little or no advance notice. So I developed general action plans in advance to help me manage these transitions. As examples, I always had a communication plan and an operations plan. The communications plan would include things like who needs to be informed about this change? What information should those individual parties receive? When did these people need to be informed? In what manner would they be informed? Was it someone who needed to get an immediate phone call? Could I handle it by email? Could I do a press release? Like, what was the right way to make this information known? What staff would be the people responsible for making these connections, and who would handle media inquiries? The operations plan always included what duties needed to be covered immediately and what duties needed to be reassigned in the longer term. How would we deal with the office equipment that the departing staff member had access to, such as phones, computers, vehicles, etc.? How would we deal with the departing staff's access to data, contacts, and technology? How would files and information be secured and transferred, and when would these steps be taken, and who would take each action? Developing action plans in advance helped me to act quickly, efficiently, and very importantly, confidently that I wasn't going to miss something, and to focus on the content of the work that needed to be done. The final strategy that I want to talk about real briefly today was to learn from our decisions and our process. We should develop the habit of debriefing to learn what worked well and where we could have done better. I want to emphasize that we should always seek and appreciate feedback. Our teams, the people that we work with, must feel comfortable in providing feedback. Feedback, positive and negative, is a gift to help us perform and improve. So seeking feedback and paying attention to it and having an open mind to it is very, very important. Sarah, if we have any questions, we can take those now, or I'll just turn to the panel for some closing comments.
Thank you, Donna. Well, we're still waiting to receive some questions.
Okay.
So if anybody has any questions, one thing that I've been wondering about, if you're willing to receive
Yep.
you know, some feedback here, is just with regard to the whole process of critical thinking. The steps that you've outlined have been so helpful. And I'm just wondering from you or from the panelists, if you've thought about, you know, how to work with others who are not sort of as committed to this process, or, you know, who are not as engaged in the topic or the concept of approaching things critically. What kind of advice would you offer for, you know, for folks working with teams who are not sort of as receptive to this process?
Well, I'm gonna say a few things, and I'm gonna give our panel a few minutes to think about this, and
Sure.
then if anybody wants to chime in there, you can. I think that first of all, you have to model the behavior that you expect the people that you work with and your team to perform with. So it's really very important to model that behavior, but also to talk about it, to also say, oh wow, that's really outside the box thinking. We never thought of that. That's a great idea. Or to say to someone, geez, we didn't, you know, consider that this could be a negative outcome. Thank you for bringing that up. That was really good. Let's go down that path and let's examine it, you know. Or we're getting ready to make this very important decision. It's going to affect a lot of people. Let's get these people together that's going to impact, and let's get feedback from them. I mean, in some ways, I think that the leader has to model and also has to like communicate how important these things are, and give reinforcement to the people on the team who are willing to voice these things and bring these things up. And so I'm going to stop right there and see if any of our four panelists would like to make any additional comments.
I would like to say, I think that it's very important as a leader that you know who your team members are, you understand them, right? So if you have somebody on your team who maybe isn't responding or isn't as motivated toward the team goals as, as expected, maybe it's important to see, okay, where do they find motivation and run with that, right? Or see what exactly is their resistance, right? And maybe it's something that has to do with the team itself. Maybe it has something to do with the goals of the team, or it has something to do personally. But as a leader, it's important that you know exactly who that person is and what their motivations are and what their concerns are, to best, utilize their skill sets. Because if not everyone's going to be motivated by the same thing, and there's so many different factors that go into achieving a goal. So if you're kind of pushing for one area, but the person is way more, inclined to work towards another area, you should pursue that instead. And I think, as Donna said, I think it's important to be very upfront with your goals. So while everyone in a team needs to be considered, not everybody in the team necessarily, I don't want to say this in a way that someone shouldn't be on the team, but sometimes people's goals don't align and, they're best off doing something else. Not to say that they're not able or they're not capable, but people are most motivated to do things that they enjoy doing. So I think being very upfront at the beginning, saying, hey, this is what we want to accomplish, and this is what's expected from here on out, and making sure that everybody on that team aligns with that before, kind of getting into the meat of your project, I think is important.
Anyone else from the panel want to comment? Yes, Tanya.
Yes, and I would like to say that also actions and example speak louder than words. You can say whatever you want to say, but if you don't show in yourself, in your own life, that you are working on what you're really saying, and we're trying to motivate the people to do what, support your word and work through a goal. For example, in social movements that I am really involved to, it's something that you don't have any regard in an economical way. Just I don't know, the satisfaction of accomplish good things for the people and for the teams and for groups as a community, as a society. And it's something that has to do a lot with volunteering, and I don't know, just being as genuine from the bottom of the heart is what really, I don't know, people looking at your example, it will motivate and make changes in their actions too.
Very good.
Excellent. We have another question if you're ready.
Yeah, sure.
So I think that this one specifically is related to seeking diversity of thought and thinking from a variety of perspectives. But how do you advise people to best tackle conflicting thoughts when trying to make major decisions?
Let me again say a few words about that, and while the panel can give that a little bit of thought, and then you guys can jump in on that. That's a really tough one, and conflict resolution is a real talent, because when there is conflict, the natural reaction is for people to put up a wall, to push back, to dig in, and it makes it difficult to move people when our natural reaction is that. So conflict resolution is a great topic for a whole other workshop, but I would say that what I have learned is, first of all, I have almost never been in a situation where I could not find some common ground with people. So if we say, look, my goal in this is to achieve X. Is your goal in this to achieve X? Great, we agree. Our goal is to achieve X. And we may have to negotiate a little bit on that, but we're going to come to a point where we can agree on what the goal is. Then once we can agree on what the goal is, then we can build on, well, all of our different thoughts, but continue to go back to, this is our goal. This is what we agree on. It kind of lets people sit back a little bit and say, okay, we all want the same things. We see it differently, but we all want the same things. And I think that, you know, developing the ability to listen to people, to really listen and really hear. And when they're talking to you, not to rebut, but to listen and ask questions and repeat what they're saying. Let me make sure I understand. This is what you're saying. Like, please explain this to me. I want to understand you. And then expecting the same kind of response from them, making sure that you have ground rules that allow for both parties to get things out on the table. It's difficult. It's very difficult. I know that, but it can be done. And would anybody on the panel like to make any comments about that? Yes, Jess.
Yeah, so just kind of go off of Donna's point a little bit more. I think another big thing too would have to be intent versus impact, and making sure that you're honing those communication and dialogue skills pretty well. I think at the end of the day, whenever you're experiencing an organization or initiative, right, that is bringing a lot of diverse people to the table, obviously that's great, but I think innately, you know, ideas will clash and whatnot. But I think it's important to be very mission-driven focus as well, because, you know, as mentioned, at the end of the day, everyone at the table is going to be centered towards that mission and that goal. So I think healthy conflict is very good and very understandable and really essential for growth. But as mentioned, it's how we navigate through that.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could build on that, when we're navigating, I think one of the best things to start with is to try and really get as nuanced and dialed in on what the actual difference of opinion is. So if someone says, I think it's a bad idea. Okay, well, why? Well, I think it's not feasible. Well, why isn't it feasible, right? Getting down to the root of where, well, I think it's going to either cost too much money, or I think it's not going to be inclusive of the neighborhood. Whatever the issue is, you've got the drivers of the conversation, just like they want to get through, they just want to implement as quick as possible. But, you know, you want to hear the opinion of the analytical person who thinks, well, hey, you know, I don't think it's feasible with 5 people. I think we need at least 15, but they might just say it's not possible. So to give the space to understand why they don't think it's possible, and not everyone is verbal. So to do the justice of making a space that is accessible to people with different styles, it might look like, okay, we're going to real quick pause. We're going to take 2 minutes. We're going to have time for folks to journal. Then we're going to break into groups of 2 or groups of 3 to talk in small groups, because not everyone's inspired by public speaking. That shuts down a lot of people, and you've only got a few voices in the room. And then also making sure that, you know, the whole step up, step back scenario, so that folks who might look like me, you know, aren't the only ones talking, right? We're making sure that differences of opinion, different backgrounds are heard. And sometimes that's journaling, sometimes that's small group breakouts, sometimes that's putting on a paper, and sometimes it's tabling an idea, because we need more time to really dial in and have small group decision-making around what are the roots of these problems, where is the common ground, and what steps can we do to find places to move forward.
Awesome. Very good. Very good.
We have time for one more question if you're
Okay.
ready. So this question comes from Cindy. When a decision has to be made quickly and there's no time to go through the process, how can critical thinking be used?
Okay, panel, give this some thought. I'll take a stab at this and then ask for your feedback. Well, the first thing I would say is that to try to anticipate, as a leader, you need to be prepared for when things, and help people move forward and things go really well. But you also have to be prepared for things to not go so smoothly and for there to be obstacles and issues. And as much as you can think about those things and plan ahead, in my previous job, my staff would tell you that my words were, expect the best, plan for the worst. We tried to expect that everything we were going to do was going to go great. We had great ideas. We wanted to accomplish a lot of things, but we also knew that sometimes things do go wrong, and we had to be prepared to handle that. We owe it to the people that we serve to be prepared to handle that. So I think that that's kind of where my process of having these action plans grew from. When I experienced my first unexpected transition was happening in my department, I was a little bit flat-footed, right? I was all over the place, trying to handle too many things at one time. And I just started writing everything down, and I came up with these plans. And every time we had a transition, I went back to my plan and said, did I forget to put something on here? Oh yeah, I need to add this and this. So having a plan is a good thing. The other thing is that I think don't underestimate yourself, because as you practice these critical thinking skills, they do become kind of like a habit. And then when they're a habit, your thought process will help you kind of keep up with it. It will kick in. And communication is so important in that regard. So let me throw it open to our panel if anybody has anything they'd like to add to that. Tanya.
Well, yeah, I would like to, I don't know, it depends on the role that you have and corporation or a group or a team or whatever. You have to keep really in mind what is the primary interest that I was talking in my intervention just a couple of minutes ago. Why? Because it depends on your profession and your work and your role, the primary interest that you will have, and always keep in mind as the thing that it will have more weight once you have to see the benefits and the consequences, good or bad, of your decisions and the making decisions that you have to do, okay? There are a lot of conflicting thoughts that can be influenced by those secondary interests that we all have. And it's not something bad. I mean, it's not bad to have it, but we have to keep in mind the primary interest. For example, in medicine, you have to be reaching and working always for the health and the welfare of your patients. Because even if you have, I don't know, given a prescription of some formula or some drugs or some treatment will give you money or will be better for your, I don't know, your hospital or your corporation, whatever, you have to keep in mind, wait, what is the primary interest? Is it really good for my patients? And it applies, I mean, in all of the other professions.
Very good. Well, Sarah, it looks like we're at 12:59 here, so I think we're at a point where we're going to wrap things up a little bit. And I just want to say that I hope there have been some points made today that will help all of us continue to develop our critical thinking skills. I know that I learned a lot today listening to our great panelists, and I want to thank Andon, Tanya, Jess, and Jarrett for their valuable insights. And I want to thank Sarah for convening all of us today. And many thanks to everyone that, that has attended today as well. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Donna, for your leadership and organization of this workshop. We really appreciate it. Bye, everyone. Thank you.